one, I got featured in Bloomberg magazine, and then the other one in Business Insider that brought the attention to some people like Gary Vaynerchuk and his team, where they recruited me to help them build essentially their Vayner Commerce or VaynerX as they call it today. So I'm like, okay, I have 7 grand that I saved up for this, and it's not a lot. So what I did was I found one client and I said to him, is like, hey, listen, I won't charge you a thing. Just give me a percentage of the sales. And he's like, Anderson, I'm already doing $1 million. It's like, give me a percentage of anything that I do above $1 million.
Guys, what's going on? We get another episode of the One Network here. Been a little bit of a break. I was on a trip, just focusing on some other areas of the business, but now we're getting back down and dirty with the podcast. I got Anderson Salgado with me. He is an entrepreneur specializing in e-com. I know we have a lot of e-com stores, Anderson, in our community. People trying to scale. A lot of people also servicing Amazon stores and whatnot, whether it's like an affiliate marketplace. We have a SaaS. And then a bunch of different types of marketing consultants. So very curious to hear your background, time at Amazon, how you founded your current company, and kind of how that journey has been getting there. Also want to get into obviously tactics and marketing as well. But for the stage of early kind of entrepreneurs that we have, can you give a quick background as to who you are and how you got into business in the first place?
So I served 12 years in the Marine Corps, and after I got out from B school, or I got my master in business, Amazon likes to do a lot of recruiting from colleges, directly from Ivy League schools. I was fortunate enough to get my interviews at Amazon. They give you 8 different interviews for the position that I was in. I was fortunate enough to go into either the beauty category or the diaper consumable category, and I picked beauty so I could get better samples. I kid you not, that was one of the deciding factors. But make a long story short, I served at Amazon for 2 years as a category leader, trying to essentially grow their business from 600 million at the time. In a 2-year basis, we grew to 1.7 billion, 2,500 brands. But I left Amazon after I worked with a major company where they asked me to build them a strategy on maximization on e-commerce using Amazon as a catapulting platform. And they got acquired for 400 million, and they sent me a bottle of champagne and a box of chocolates. And I swear I thought I was gonna get a nice $1 million contract, just do it again with them. But it was a point of realization for me to build my own thing, right? So a lot of entrepreneurs is either you're forced into entrepreneurship, whether it is from family or you lose your job or you're trying to feed your family in a different way than before, or essentially you have an experience that brings light into or sense into your lifestyle. And that was for me, right? I saw light at the end of the tunnel into entrepreneurship. Built my own agency in 2017, 2018, around that time frame. So started working as a solopreneur, getting some clients to serve them on e-commerce, primarily Amazon, since that's what I knew. And little by little, I started building major businesses on that Amazon methodology, how to grow from zero to hero in essentially 18 months. For me, the differentiating factor was a couple things that happened. One, I got featured in Bloomberg magazine, and then the other one in Business Insider that brought the attention to some people like Gary Vaynerchuk and his team, where they recruited me to help them build essentially their Vayner Commerce or VaynerX as they call it today. And again, great experience. Worked with them for a year. Went back to my agency and tried to essentially do what they did, but on the Amazon strategic planning. And today we do not only Amazon, but Shopify. We have our own e-commerce platform. And one of the things that it's elevating the voice is how can we differentiate our business from the rest using analytics and human behavior to understand trends and tendencies. And that's what I've been doing since 2018.
Nice. So I guess getting, you obviously got some training there with the previous companies, but like getting into starting this first company, what are some
Yeah.
of the first things that you do to like get that company off the ground or build it? What are the
Yeah,
first
that's a
steps?
great question. So again, a lot of my entrepreneur friends and even myself, you're either forced into entrepreneurship or something happens drastically where you know you have to make a change. A lot of times is whether you think you can do something better than what other people in the industry are doing, or again, it just falls into your lap and then you just do the deep dive. For me was, I'm a very analytical person, right? I have to think everything in a very logical standpoint, and leaving your job at Amazon where you make $250,000 for some people may not be a lot, but for me at the time was a lot. Leaving that with the stocks, I got into the stocks at $660. At the peak was 3,500, and that was a scary moment, right? Because you know you're gonna go into a position of not wealth but struggle. And I think 90% of the entrepreneurs that I speak to have that moment where it's like, hey, I had a great job and all of a sudden I go into building my own business. I'm not making near I was as much
What
as I
they're
was
doing in the
making
career
before.
wise? Yeah.
Correct. But that level of security is always pretty ambiguous, right? Whether you think you have something better, to me was a deciding factor, knowing that I needed to have my family and be supportive of my family. And the only way that I can do that is through success. Again, I'm still nowhere near where I want to be, but for to answer your question, I think is action. Like if you think you have something great, make a plan and go at it. There is no soft way of doing it. As you guys know, you cannot go into a business and say, okay, I'm going to do it as a side gig for now, and then try to build it, on the weekends. That's only a selective few. For most of us, it's just going to be go all in and just make sure that you put your time and effort into it. And then the side piece would be how to make money to pay the rent and to pay the bills. So that shouldn't be the number one. It should be like the business. The second portion should be how do I make, the payments of the mortgage. Well, okay, I'm gonna go bartending on the side, but the business is gonna be
How do
the
you make
one
it
that
work? Yeah.
exactly how I make the long term investment. There's a great quote that I always follow: is never sacrifice long term engagements for short term gains. So just because something looks pretty amazing in the short term does not supersede the long term approach. Long term is always going to win.
Interesting. Okay, cool. So, do you go into your business with like some funds saved up? Do you try to fundraise? How do you like bankroll that? When you started the business.
Bro, I've done it both ways. And I'll give you my honest feedback, but I'll tell you how I approach both elements. So the first time I went into business again, I think I had like 7 grand in the bank account, but I had to stretch that out. Be aware when you're at Amazon, you make good money, but again, working in Washington, everything is super expensive in Seattle, and on top of that, I had a lot of bills to pay. So I'm like, okay, I have 7 grand that I saved up for this, and it's not a lot. Um, so what I did was I found one client, right? I found one client, and I said to him, is like, hey, listen, I won't charge you a thing, just give me a percentage of the sales. And he's like, Anderson, I'm already doing $1 million. It's like, give me a percentage of anything that I do above a million.
Above it. Okay.
And he agreed. I put easily 80 hours a week, and I knew that I had to make something happen within 2 months. I had 2 months of bills paid. That's all I had. And little by little, I started working on this brand, just going from the foundation. Okay, let's set up the strategy. Let's do this. Let's make sure that we're scrappy on our spending. No, don't put $100,000 on advertising just yet. Just let's do it in a way that is smart. That to me worked out really well. On the other hand, in my other venture, I had capital infusion and I had seed investment. And you make such foolish decisions when you have the money in the bank. It's
That is
outrageous.
true. You just don't look at it the same way. I've always said
You
that
don't
as
look at it the
bootstrapping,
same
you
way.
make smarter decisions for sure.
Listen, I made such better decisions when I had not a penny in my bank account because I knew that if I would make a mistake, I was gonna struggle. I wasn't gonna be able to pay the bills. On the other side, when I had money, I'm like, hey, how much is it? Just pay the darn thing. It's like if it's gonna give us, 4x of our investment, just pay the darn thing. Another side is like, no, we lost, 20 grand, we lost 15 grand. Or hey, let's go into this fulfillment, and that fulfillment is going to be able to do X, Y, and Z for us. Okay, how much is it going to be? Okay, it's going to be 2,000 a month. Okay, no problem. Get in it, sign the contract. 6 months later, we pay all this money, and now we have to move the inventory to another fulfillment because I didn't do my due diligence. I just pay the bill. And when you pay that bill, the problem that you have is that you cut corners. So they went under. I now have to move my inventory, cost me twice as much to a different fulfillment. But to answer your question, I guarantee you'll be better by bootstrapping the whole thing. Start slow, get in the
especially with an
clients,
agency.
concentrate on the business,
Yeah.
especially on an agency. Don't try to hire the guy that is going to cost you 200 grand a year or 300 grand a year because he's got experience. You know what? You can get the same thing out of three people who are hungry and they're going to do the same job as the guy that costs you 200 grand. And then the
There's
other thing
also
that you need to
things
get,
you need to learn, I feel like. Do you know what I'm saying? That you
bro,
wouldn't do if,
100%.
yeah.
A hundred. I mean, the best teacher is going to be the struggle, right? It's going to be the pain, and it's going to be the suffering. So the best teacher for me is like, okay, I did this with no money, and it worked out. Now that I have money, we just wasted so much money on trying to make it big when we should have concentrated on trying to get that customer acquisition, that customer retention in a nice way. So if I was to choose and you have the money, put the money in something that you can touch and then just feed it little by little and say, okay, this is what I have for the next 2 months. Let's say that is 10 grand. Okay, we have $100,000 in the bank, but I can't touch that. I only have 2 months to survive on with this 10. Let's make it happen in the next 3 months with this 10 or 15 grand, because you create an illusion of a very frugal and bootstrapping mindset as a business, even though you have the funds. So I would always go to be scrappy, don't overspend, be frugal, and know where you're coming from. Like that humility always pay off. At least it has for me and the people that I've spoken to. So to answer your questions, like frugality and bootstrapping, the whole thing to me is often more beneficial than getting the funding or going for investments.
Cool. So extending from that question, what would have been some of the biggest challenges in those first few years of starting the business that came up that you wouldn't have expected going into it?
The biggest ones that I would go through it, understanding when you're a generalist and when you're a specialist. I'll give you a prime example. Majority of us that do businesses, we're generalist. And the reason why I say generalist is because you, as an entrepreneur, when you're starting off, you are the finance or the CFO, CEO, COO. You manage the HR, and then you also manage customer service. So you're a generalist by nature, but as you grow, you start becoming you start really delegating your job to a more specialist, to people who are better at what you're doing on a general term. So what I mean by that, the struggle is when to take your hat off and delegate that job that's required for other people to do. Majority of solopreneurs and entrepreneurs have a hard time delegating and giving the job to the people that know how to do something better than you. And even if they don't know how to do it better, at least their time allocation is better than yours because you have five different roles. So for me, that was the biggest thing, right? When I was a solopreneur, as I mentioned, I was the CFO, CFO, and and all the other jobs that are required to run a business. But as you grow, I need to hire people who are going to do that job, even if they don't do it 100% like I would. So I follow, and I found this a pretty clever idea. Again, it's not native thought, but I've used it and it's worked really well. It's the 140% rule. 100%, 140% rule dictates the following. If I know how to do something really well, let's say sales, I'm great at sales and I'm great at managing people. If I have two roles, I'm split 50-50 or 60-40, but I'm split nevertheless. I'm not going to be 100% on sales, or I'm not going to be 100% on managing personnel. I'm going to be split in those two roles. If I was to hire a salesperson, again, I do my due diligence. I've hired based on meritocracy. That even if that person's not as good at sales as I am, and let's say that is 70% of where I am, but I hired two of them, now I am 140%. Versus me, I'm going to be split, and it's always going to be 50-50 or 60-40. So even at my best with my split time, that person's output is 10% better than mine.
Got it.
So to me was knowing when to stop being, a specialist and be more of a generalist and hire specialists that will do a better job than I could once they are fully embedded into the business and they have essentially the training that they require. Even at their worst day, if I hire the right person, their output is gonna be at least 70% when mine is gonna be 50. So it's gonna beat my 50% every day, anytime during the week, primarily because their output will supersede mine since I have a split time. So that was the hardest thing for me, delegation and understanding when to step away from the multi hat role, and then ensure that the people that I hire have the autonomy and the support to make the right decisions.
How do you, I mean, in general, hiring people in the early stages is super hard. Like, how do you know if they're good or smart? You know what I'm saying? Especially at like an entry level salary. Like, what are some of the tests that you use to kind of see if somebody's good or not? Or can you not know until after you hire them?
No, so at the beginning, yeah, I was hiring people, and then I knew a week into it they weren't going to work. But afterwards, to me, it was very telling, very telling, just from a couple of interviews. What I started doing though is I started building a group of people, whether it was friends or individuals that I trusted, that would give me their honest opinion about that individual, no filter. So essentially, it's even advisors, trusted advisors, where I can go and say, hey Chris, can you spare an hour of your time to give this person an interview on your area of expertise? Let's say your area of expertise is understanding people well, or analytics, or depending on the role, we may have something else completely, like organization skills, or quantitative skills, or whatever the case may be. So I'm going to hire someone that I trust, that is going to give me an unfiltered opinion about that person, because as human beings, we have a lot of biases. You say something, or you went to a particular school, or you resonated with me on a comment, and all of a sudden I'm going to put you in a higher bracket than the rest of the people that I'm interviewing, primarily because I have some sort of affinity with you. So having a group of advisors that will tell me
Interesting.
on a very
Honest level.
altruistic and honest manner what they think about that candidate serves me well. So I'm the last to interview, not the first. So after I provide that interview, then I read everybody else's comments, so I have a very unbiased opinion, and I go, you know what, yeah, now that I read Chris's comment, yeah, that's true, right? Like, I didn't notice that about him until Chris mentioned it. And so I have both an unbiased opinion about the candidate, and then I have my affinity at first, no problem, but it's a very unfiltered way to interview. And then the other portion that I do, and I've started to exercise pretty heavily, is a multi-interview process, where one is concentrated, where I'm
I've
asking,
heard this one before. This is an
yeah,
interesting one.
I've asked questions about personal life, like, hey, where you come from, blah, blah, blah. So I know really where their drivers are. But then the other ones is like, hey, suppose that I give you this, how would you approach this? And imagine that I give you this exercise. What are some of the things that you can think of? Or I'm going to give you a task. get back at me with this in the next 2 days. If the person doesn't give it to me in the next day, I know that that person's not going to do their best at their job, because essentially they're diluted in their intent. So it's just little tests here and there, not to really understand people's capability, but to understand people's intent and grit. Sometimes I got in the wrong answer when I give them a task or I ask them a question, but the fact that they went out of their way to get it done, to me, that shows way more intent than someone who is, savvy and educated and has all the accolades, and all of a sudden doesn't put any effort and they think that they can just swing it. And the reason why that's detrimental is because that's how they're going to approach the job. So if you have someone who's got all the education and the status, but none of the intent, versus someone who doesn't have the education but they're driven, I'll pick the one that is driven all day long, because I know that that person is going to be loyal and is going to give me 100% even if they don't know the answer.
Got it. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I interviewed a guy recently on the podcast who had just like a very simple heuristic for this that I was pretty impressed by. But it's something me running an agency with that I've always had it's always been a struggle. How do you look at sales, acquiring new clients? What's your kind of process or go to channel there?
Sales is finicky, as you probably know. So anytime that you're into sales, you have to get the right candidate, the right client. I think is a two-way street. I think that not only you as a service provider, you're interviewing for the client to get you as a service provider, but what we often as agencies don't do is we evaluate also our client. The clients that I've had something with, I'm like, I don't know if this is a right fit for us, never turn into a good client, whether they don't pay on time or
The
they
gut
ask
feeling you're
too
talking about.
to the
Yeah.
gut feeling, man. Uh, Anytime that I have that gut feeling of a client is like, man, this guy's have like three other agencies in there that they're just, this is just a bidding war. Um,
Yeah, I've
and
been there. I
and
know what you're talking about. Yeah.
and it's just never good because they're always going to ask more. One of the things that I say to them is like, I don't discount my services. If you come to me and say, hey, I went to another agency and they're offering me this, um, to me is a very simple. Do you value time? Do you value relationships, or you value experience? What are some of the things that you value? And if you value pricing, I'm not your guy. Because if you value pricing, you're always going to ask more and you're going to expect that delivery, yet it's going to be difficult for us to get that from you. Because what happens is, when you have some clients who are always trying to get a better bang for their buck, they don't value your work and they don't value your time. If you see the best clients that you have is like, how much you charge? Listen, I like you. I like your approach. I like what you said. You gave me a really good insight, nice evaluation of the business at no cost. I want to work with you because I think you're the best candidate. So they don't haggle with pricing, right? And those are the people that I want to do my best for, because those are the guys that are genuine and they're going to pay on time. But if they say to
Okay,
you,
I have a quick. I got a key question with this because this is something that a lot of people that come on the podcast say. Do you feel like that's a personality thing, or it's something in their reaction to you and your offer?
yeah, I think perhaps the offer, it's always got to be an offer that provides value. And if the value is not well received, then it doesn't matter what you do, it's never going to be enough value. So I don't disagree with you. But if you were to tell me, is like, Anderson, look, this is the way that I approach things. I'm going to give you a badass product. If you don't like it, you don't pay me. But if you do, I want you to know that I'm the top tier of the service providers that you're probably going to have a conversation with. The question that I always say is the following: you want something to be a band aid of your problem right now, or do you want a true solution? I remember telling one of our clients a quick anecdote. Um, again, I could tell that he was of money. He had sold his company for 150 million. He had the funds, but he was just trying to like, well, the other agency will cost me this. And they have approached me this, and they're a bigger team than you. And I said, okay, listen, I respect that. Those guys do a great job. But God forbid something happens to you and a you have to get brain surgery. Are you going to get the cardiovascular surgeon or the heart surgeon to do neurosurgery on you? Or are you going to get the best neurosurgeon you can afford to get the job done? If the answer is I'm going to get the best neurosurgeon I can because that's the guy that is the most qualified, the other agency, they do great at this category. I know what I do well, and that's beauty, Amazon optimization. If you want a neurosurgeon on that, you hire me. If you want to risk it with the heart surgeon, go for it. I mean, they do a fine job in these other categories, but I guarantee you, the conversation you and I have is the conversation that we're often going to have. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to tell you the truth about the growth and the products. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but at the same time, I'm going to put my time and my effort with my team. If that resonates with you, I'm your guy. If not, then I wish you the best. And look, the guy was like, no, I want the neurosurgeon. So you're it. I think just having a frank conversation with people who value your time and your work is the best approach. Otherwise, you're just going to be, fighting in the minutia of pricing or anything else, and they're never going to see your value. So I agree. I think there's a personality trait that goes involved, but I think is very truthful. When people do really understand what you provide and your value, they're not gonna try to lessen the price or the cost simply because they understand what you can do for them.
Got it. So what are your goals for the next 3 to 5 years? What are you trying to accomplish with the business?
So there's I have a 10-year plan, and the 10-year plan, it goes from, again, very simplistic in nature to very complex in the details, right? And I think that attention in the details is key. So for my agency, we're trying to do, again, the optimization of larger brands, um, get resonate with large companies, especially in the beauty category, be a specialist in that niche. And I think is ideal simply because you get agencies that want to do everything, and then they lose the stuff that they did great when they started. I don't want to lose that, right? I want to make sure that if I'm a great sprinter, I'm not going to try to go and be a rugby player. Although I could be, that's not how I started, and that's not what differentiated me. But I am investing in our own e-commerce platform. We have a e-commerce platform by the name of Dall'Italia. Ideally, we're bringing products from Italy. We're launching them in the US. I fell in love with Italy's methodology, craftsmanship, ingredients, and formulation. So we have beauty products that we're launching into the US market. And then the other portion that we're trying to do really is utilize our Amazon expertise to also launch those brands into the Amazon ecosystem. That, in combination with investment funding and having the ability to manufacture and private label our own products, my goal is to grow that ecosystem as much as possible and sell it in the next 5 to 7 years, where I can go and retire with with my wife in the vineyard in Italy and still be part of the business, but not
Gotta love
necessarily
it.
go, spend 8 hours or 80 hours a week just trying to build something where my youth and my life just went away for doing business. So enjoying my family and having a bunch of kids running around. I think that's very few people's dream, but that's one of mine. Just some something that
Yeah, it's good to
I
have that vision. Yeah,
yeah, it's
I
a
think
it's a
so.
it's a vision, it's a clean vision, at least in my eyes. And then I want to be a mentor for other entrepreneurs, right? So not charge anything, do it for free, and just really elevate people's game with whatever I can offer.
Cool. Any last kind of takeaways, advice for people that you learned on the path to greatness? What
Yeah.
would you leave people with?
Well, one, don't do it for yourself, do it for some higher power. For me, again, God's been the best incentive for me to ensure that I do good, and I do everything to the highest of my abilities. Helping people out, um, comes back tenfold to you. And then the other portion that I would say more on the business oriented side is have realistic expectations. So a lot of people is like, hey, I want to do $1 million this year. Bro, you're doing $2,000 a month. How are you going to get to 1 million? It's like, well, like we got, they have just such high expectations for themselves and they fall short. I'm not saying don't have dreams, but if you have those dreams, have some dreams that are attainable and achievable. Otherwise, you just run too fast, too soon, too sloppy, and then all of a sudden you're like, "Hey, I didn't even achieve 500,000, and I was shooting for 1 million. That's great, but you're never content. So have realistic expectations on your input, so you have a better outcome."
Interesting. Cool. Well, Anderson, I'm going to leave it at that. Thanks so much for coming on. A lot of value here for everybody. You catch us on all platforms, and we'll be putting out the full podcast in the next week or so. So check that out. Anderson, where can people find you and follow you and get in touch?
Sure. Trispel.com is our agency. You can email me at info@trispel.com. I have an Instagram. It's the Salgado Squad. You can reach me out there too.
Nice.
And we also run a podcast. It's called Faith Frontlines on Fortune. So if anybody wants to reach out, more than welcome to lend a hand.
Nice. Cool. Guys, it's the One Network.
Storm.